Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Airsickhydra, and in this video we're going to be going through some Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden tips and tricks to make your life a little bit easier. I've currently pumped about 10 hours into the hardest difficulty of the campaign, and having made lots of mistakes, I think there's a few things I'd like to share with you. To start off with, I want to go through the category of tips known as picking off enemies successfully. This is one of the most important features of the game, being able to take out enemies when they're away from packs of groups. Being able to do this quickly, silently and effectively is the only way I think you're going to be able to make your way through the harder difficulties without simply dying all the time. So, obviously having a stealth weapon equipped on each character is a good place to start. This allows you to maximize your damage. Everyone gets one shot per turn, so this simply is a no-brainer if you're looking to pick off groups or members of groups silently from around the outskirts. Now for some of the more, let's say, intricate tips. First up, 100% is far more reliable than 75, and there is a little bit of a toss-up when it comes to ambushing an opponent. Generally speaking, you'll have a higher critical percentage when shooting from hidden. However, you will often be shooting at a 75% hit chance due to range. You do have the option of still moving, and even though they spot you, they will not have an opportunity to alert their allies until their turn. So what I generally suggest is using your movement first to move to 100% hit chance range and then shooting. Having reliable damage at this point, especially when you only have 3 team members, is absolutely essential, and if you want to be taking units down without relying on RNG working in your favour, moving into better positions to get yourself a reliable hit chance is far more effective. On the odd occasion too, you will also not be spotted, and sometimes that will therefore lead to a higher critical hit percentage because you'll be shooting from hidden. Now, there will be situations, and this comes to the next tip, there will be situations where stuns will be required in order to take down an enemy before they have a turn and can notify their allies. They need to be active on their turn to actually shout to their allies, so if you're able to do something to stun them, such as a charge move from Piglet or an EMP grenade or something like that against a mechanical unit, this will be highly effective against them. This basically means you get 2 rounds, or even more if you stun them for multiple turns, to take down said opponent. So even though those silent weapons don't have a huge amount of damage, you can continue to chip away at them and take them down fairly safely. Now next, let's go back to those pesky robots. Medbots in particular can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. Do remember when taking them down around the outskirts that EMP grenades do not trigger nearby units. Obviously if it's within a visual range they will be spotted, but EMP grenades are more or less treated as silent. So if you need an extra couple of rounds to take down a medbot because they do have a good amount of armor, use an EMP grenade, or you could even consider using one of the weapon attachments which has a chance to disable mechanical units. This generally ranges from 30 to 50%, but if you have enough units shooting, these items can be pretty useful, and they can also save you having to use all of your EMP grenades. Lovely to have. And finally, within this section of taking down enemies, I would advise patience. I have even walked around for up to 10 minutes simply looking for individual units that are on patrol patterns where I can take one down silently. It is really worth surveying the scenery and having a good look around a map before deciding where to commit in terms of combat strategy. Your guys are called stalkers for a reason, and stalking enemies within this game is really the way to go. Sometimes you'll think that there is no way to easily take down a group, and waiting another couple of minutes looking around those extra couple of avenues, you'll finally see 1 or 2 opponents you can take down safely, which is going to make the final fight a lot easier. Now the next tip category is the actual combat category itself. First, we're going to come back to those pesky medbots, because I know sometimes they are going to be within packs. You're not going to be able to take them down. Remember, you can also interrupt their healing ability by either a pushback or a stun. So even though they've gone down to start the resurrection process, which will take an entire turn to complete, you can then still stun them and prevent them from resurrecting something. This is something incredibly useful to keep an eye on. You can also simply opt for rooting them in place, and if they're not able to move, they're not able to resurrect anything. It's something very useful to know. Now do remember that this game does have a cover system, and obviously it goes without saying that using high cover gives you a far better percentage chance to mitigate damage or to basically be missed. But if you want a bonus chance to hit an enemy, even at a fairly moderate range, go for high ground. High ground not only gives you an advantage to hit, but it gives the enemy a disadvantage to hit as well. It really does swing things in your favour, and I would say even if you're looking to ambush an enemy, if there is the opportunity of using high ground, this is very useful. It often provides an extra layer of protection as well from melee units that aren't able to get into combat with you. Keep an eye out. Next often comes a question of priority. Obviously there will be enemies within this game that you want to take down as a priority. These are pretty much often the shaman, because these guys are going to summon an extra 3 units if you don't take them down before they have their turn. Now there's multiple ways to do this. The stun ability again is probably a priority here, but there will also be various other abilities available later in the game, such as mind control, etc., which will be very, very useful for taking these guys down. During the earlier periods this may be hard to do on some of the difficult settings, but perhaps keep one of those stuns in mind and keep it there ready for these guys, because they really do need high priority. An extra 3 units to take down is pretty tough to do. And lastly within the combat is don't be lazy. Go back to base if you need to and change your equipment. You can often change gear on the fly and you will have plenty of gear available to you, but if you need a bunch of frag grenades that you don't have and a group of 4 enemies are all grouped up together and you think this is going to be an easy fight to take down, go and get yourself that equipment changed. Or if you find that your weapons are suddenly lackluster and you want to change for something else that has an increased chance of, say, taking down units by applying fire or something like that, go back to base, make the changes, come back. The fight will still be there. Being patient really is useful. And lastly, we end up at the actual admin portion of the tips and advice. Now, firstly, I would say don't go too crazy within the shop, especially early on and especially within the harder difficulties. You will need lots of medkits. Medkits will be your primary way of healing on the very hard difficulty, because you will not regenerate health between fights. You will need a lot of medkits. And if you lash out too much early on, you may find yourself lacking and you may find yourself in a bit of a sticky situation. So I would always keep an eye open. There will be other ways to heal later on once you've got a few more mutations, but don't go wasting too much scrap for the sake of getting upgrades that you don't really feel you need. Every now and again you may find there's a fight with a particular difficulty spike and that extra 1 or 2 points of damage may be useful, in which case go right ahead. Now this leads us to the next type of upgrades, and this is to the actual weapons within the game. You may well feel that upgrading silent weapons is not particularly useful. They do lower damage and you soon find plenty of weapons that do a lot more damage, and you can often feel that you even maybe regret some of the upgrades on silent weapons, but you will be relying on these silent weapons, the first 3 that you find, for quite some considerable time. So I would really consider upgrading them, because you're going to be needing them in order to survive. The other weapons are great to have and they do higher damage. The sniper rifles and things of that nature are very good. They're very powerful when upgraded, but at the end of the day the game really doesn't suit a YOLO playstyle. There will be the occasional outright fights where the extra damage comes in handy, but you're going to be relying on stealth for a good 80% of the time. So I would really consider at least putting 1 or 2 points into those stealth weapons to get those upgraded a little bit more. Lastly, and the final tip for this section, is look at the mutations. See those little shapes? You can have 1 of each. They correspond with the shapes down below. This is something at least I overlooked to begin with, and I was slightly confused as to why I couldn't select different combinations. You can have a mutation, an active and a passive, and that is it. So don't make yourself a bunch of plans based on what you think is going to synergize together perfectly. At the end of the day, you're allowed 1 of each, and that's all you're going to get. So just plan ahead and take this into consideration before investing too much. I think it's probably best that we do an overview video once I've unlocked all the characters, and we'll go through the mutations and general sort of balancing advice and what I think is effective once I've completed the game, which shouldn't be too far away. Guys, I hope this gives you a little bit of help, especially for the higher difficulties, to get you started. And if you want to see more videos like this, feel free to hit that little subscribe button down below, feel free to hit the like button or the dislike button, and I'll see you next time. Take care.